On behalf of your host, Steve D., this is Bruce Buffer saying thank you for tuning in to Xtreme Life. And now, this is the moment Xtreme Life fans around the world have been waiting for. It's time! Please welcome your host. He is a shark diver, extreme athlete, and mixed martial artist. Presenting Steve D.
Hey everybody, welcome to the show. This is Steve D. from XtremeLife.com, Xtreme Life Podcast. I am going to be joined here in just a minute or two by a friend of mine, a guy named Tyler Metauro, who is a personal trainer, longtime athlete, and just a great guy all around. He's got a lot of experience, a lot of insights. He knows a ton about training, how to train efficiently, effectively, and how to, he knows a lot about nutrition. Just overall a fitness guy who knows a lot of stuff, and I'm looking forward to talking with him. He's an Olympic lifter. He does a lot of great stuff with lifting and training people. Actually, him and I met first at a gym several years ago, and he instantly saw issues with my lifting technique, and for about a year or two after that, trained me specifically on my lifting and helped a ton with my lifts. So, great guy, really knowledgeable about a number of different things. He also runs a website called Monarch Training. You could find it at monarchtraininghq.com, monarchtraininghq.com. Whole bunch of stuff on there. There's a blog on there with all kinds of great information. There's free programs on there, free stuff on there, and then all kinds of nutritional. You can get nutritional consults. You can get programming developed by Tyler. Just a ton of stuff. So check it out. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. I've been looking forward to this for a while, so hope you enjoy it. And check out the show. Here we go. I'm here with my buddy Tyler. Tyler has, why don't you just tell everybody a little bit about your background, man? What's your background look like?
So athlete all my life, played football in college, and after that wanted to get back into Olympic lifting, powerlifting, found CrossFit, coached, have been coaching in some capacity for the past 6+ years in essentially just strength, conditioning, nutrition.
Yeah, and
all that type of stuff.
And you and I first met at Endorphin CrossFit, which isn't there anymore.
No.
But you were a coach there, and I was telling you this a little while ago that I credit you a lot with my lifting. Everybody still has work to do, right? I still have that nasty early arm bend that I can't seem to get rid of.
Yeah, we tried.
we tried to get rid of that. Well, it's not as pronounced as it was. But I still have that early arm bend a little bit, and causes me to lose some of the power. But comparatively to what I used to lift like to what I lift like now, huge difference. And a lot of that is all the work you and I did together, because you were basically focused on helping me at one point get my lifts right. And with Monarch, your training program, which is great, and I want to talk a little bit about that too.
Sure.
So tell me about Monarch. What do you do at Monarch?
So right now I do remote coaching, whether it's just program design, custom program design, or now just introduced more nutrition. So I do remote nutrition counseling as well,
which is huge.
Yeah.
Huge. Yeah.
A lot of people, that's kind of what they need. But yeah, that's pretty much what I do currently with it. Eventual goal is to have my own gym, my own facility where I'm coaching athletes in person, coaching classes, as well as doing the remote thing.
Yeah, no, and then I think that's great, because I think, like I said, you helped me tremendously with a lot of that, And your ollie knowledge with ollie lifting or ollie lifting, there's a lot of debate about whether you call it
whatever
ollie or ollie.
Yeah.
But your knowledge is incredible with that. And you're putting up what's your snatch right now? I mean, it's got to be huge.
My best snatch is only 275.
You say only. I'm not even close. So
yeah. Well, that came off of my PR lifts, and my Olympic lifts were coming off of me only training them like 1 day a week, and then started to train them more often. Had a couple injuries that I'm still kind of building back up after.
Yeah.
But with those, what was I going to say?
I don't know.
No, but
I do that all the time.
No, building back up with those after a couple injuries.
Yeah.
Been training them a lot more, but I know capable of definitely a lot more than that.
Yeah. Well, your technique is great. I mean, you spend a lot of time, and I don't think people realize how much time it takes to, and how much you got to kind of put your ego aside. A lot when you're working on Olympic lifting, because even for me it was tough, because I came into the gym and hey, I'm a strong guy, I'm capable of muscling a lot of stuff, but that's not the point, right? The point isn't how much you could put up, it's how much you could put up and make it look good.
Yeah. Well, a big part of it is work on strength, get stronger, be able to lift heavier weights, but then also if you have better technique, less likely to get injured, so you can train longer, as opposed to having 2 months of time where you're not training because you're coming back from an injury or whatever. But then also better technique allows you to lift heavier weights, which is more cool. So why
and everybody wants to be cool.
Yeah,
we all want to be cool.
If you have better technique, you can lift more weight. That should be enough incentive to work on technique.
Yeah. But it's hard because you got to kind of, at least for me too, when you're capable of putting up certain numbers, and, granted, didn't look good, but now someone tells you got to take half this weight off.
Yeah.
You got to just spend time, months, with hardly any weight on this bar, just getting it right. And, and that's hard to take those, kind of put the training wheels back on the bike, so to speak, after you know how to ride already.
It also doesn't help sometimes, ego-wise, people will be like, I power cleaned this much. I'm like, a 300-pound power clean is cool, but a 301 squat clean is cooler. If you have good enough technique to go into a squat and do 1 more pound, it's more cool. So focusing on the technique to not have to muscle it up and get under it, I'd rather just lift more weight than do a variation of less weight. But be like, oh, I'm good at that variation. No one cares.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, for me too. I mean, I was just telling you before. I think I just told you I power cleaned 275 in the gym the other day. Which for me it was great. But there's a reason why I power clean that. Because my squat clean is awful.
Yeah. So if you power clean 275, you should be able to comfortably squat clean 315.
We would think.
Yeah.
One would think.
Especially with the 385 back squat that you just did.
Yeah.
It's not unreasonable to be all right, if we're efficient, 315, cool.
Yeah. No, and I agree. I mean, I think if I had that, and there's times where it's really good, and then there's times where I'm just it's a shit show, for lack of a better way to put it, with my squat cleans and even my squat snatch. It's just called a clean or a snatch. Is what it is. But, and it's definitely, I know I could put up more if I was able to get better into those positions sometimes, and some days it's just I get into it and I'm right there, and I'm like, oh, wow, I got this really moving today. Everything's working well. Nothing feels labored or struggled, and then there's other days where I'm just my hips aren't moving right. My legs are tight. I have notoriously very tight, not quads.
Ankles?
Well, my ankles are screwy too. I don't know why I can't think of the word now, but I have tight muscles in my legs a lot of times, and which sometimes causes them to not move efficiently into those lower positions. I think a lot of people probably have those issues.
Yeah, a lot of people don't necessarily focus enough time on moving properly, and taking the time to warm up and making the warm up specific to what they're doing. So if we're going to be cleaning, right? Like, let's say we're doing clean, we're going for heavy weight. We know it's going to end up being a squat. Like, what do we need to be able to do? We need to have enough flexibility in our ankles, our hips, be able to go into a deep squat. We need to be able to express power and have our back be tight so that we can transfer enough energy into the bar, and then a fast hip extension to get under the bar. We also have to have our shoulders warmed up enough to be able to keep the bar close as we pull underneath the bar. So it's like, okay, how do we design our warm up? Could do something simple of like, all right, if I want to have my squat mobility good and make that position comfortable, I should do some type of squat in my warm up, whether that's like hold a bottom end of a squat for like a couple minutes, loosen up, kind of move in it to get your ankles more warmed up. So it's like, all right, cool. Now I'm comfortable in a squat. Should be easy for me to pull under. Then it's like, all right, I need to make sure my upper body is warmed up enough to keep the bar close as I transfer under the bar. So maybe I'm doing some empty bar drills. Maybe I'm doing some PVC pipe work where I'm pulling slowly through all of those positions and make sure there's not a spot where my arms are like, no, I don't want my elbows to be up that high. Like, I can move through it and have those muscles kind of loosen up, kind of warm up so I can get into a comfortable front rack. I personally like doing like full hook grip front squats with an empty bar, which when I start doing those,
it's
first thing in the morning, I'm like it does not touch my shoulders. For the first, I do like a set of 20 where it's like, okay, it doesn't touch my shoulders until like rep 15. And then that position is warmed up tight. And then I'm able to catch the bar and stay tight. And just kind of like take the time to build your warm up specific to what you're doing that day.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%. I mean, I definitely move better when I warm up. And by the way, hamstring was the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
I was like, quad? No. And I just couldn't find it for some reason. That happens. And I'm getting old, Old age does that. But, I do spend, how much time do you think someone should spend? Now, there's all kinds of different philosophies on warming up. But how much time do you think someone should spend on? Let's break it down, though. Let's break it down into stretching and activation and all that.
Somewhere between 3 seconds and 7 hours is typically. It seems like people do one or the other.
Yeah.
But no, like a typical kind of warm up. Yeah. If there's no excessive issues of like, oh, I'm nursing this kind of injury where I need to take more time to warm it up. Like, let's say everything's cool, everything's even. We just need to get into the workout. The way I structure warm up for a lot of people is be like, all right, 2 minutes of some sort of soft tissue work. So it's like
that'd be a roller.
Or foam roll, lacrosse ball, something specific where it's like, all right, let's take cleans for example. When I go to warm up my cleans, for me, my thoracic spine will be a little bit tight, some past shoulder injuries and stuff like that. So it's like, all right, I need to make sure that my front rack is good. So I'll take a lacrosse ball to my upper back, kind of get into the subscap area so that I can turn over properly. So it's like, all right, cool. And then I'll spend 2 minutes on some type of mobility, which might be holding a position. Like I'll usually hold a squat or I'll do like SOTS presses. So I'll spend like 2 minutes or so, do a couple sets.
I just did a bunch of those the other day. It's one of my most hated moves, but
yeah. But like if you can master the SOTS press and then like really establish that bottom position with like the SOTS press of being active to be able to press the bar overhead, when you go to catch the clean, you're gonna be solid as opposed to like letting it crash, losing your upper back, like your elbows dropping. So like some SOTS presses and then activation. I personally like some like single leg box jumps. And what that does is it gets your legs warmed up to fire and really be active during the pull. So if you're someone who like has a tendency to have your hips shoot up, sometimes some single leg box jumps can be helpful to like get your legs to fire correctly during the pull. So you're using your legs instead of your like relying on your back and your hips. Tends to help a lot of people there. But like that's a simple example. And then it's like, all right, cool. Now build up to the weight.
Now, when you're looking at that, a lot of people will look at that and go, man, that's probably about 20 minutes of my gym. But
that should be like 6, right? If you spend 2 minutes on soft tissue, if you spend more than 2 minutes on like foam rolling, then you're just rolling around on the ground. Like you're not.
Well, sometimes that's fun too.
Yeah, I mean that's if you're gonna be like, all right, I'm gonna do 2 minutes here, 2 minutes this spot. Like a lot of stuff is tight. Maybe that adds up to more.
Like if you find something particular, like for me, like I'd mentioned, the hamstrings. I literally, if I'm going to be squatting or doing some type of explosive movement with the legs a lot, you know, for me, I got to spend some time on those in that area, just because it's, you know, it's so tight, you know.
Yeah, and if you need to, maybe it's like, all right, 1 or 2 minutes on the hamstrings, do some good mornings, and then go back to them.
Yeah, and
like
again.
do another 2 minutes or so.
Yeah.
Like, should work out better. But if you spend 15 minutes rolling out your hamstrings, like it's not necessarily beneficial past that point.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of different ways you can work those too, right? So, and you'd mentioned like stretching, and you'd mentioned now, and the reason I want to bring this up, because a lot of people do get confused between flexibility and mobility, right?
Yeah,
they're two different things.
Yeah,
you know, and a lot of times people use those terms interchangeably. And I think it's important to kind of get a dialogue on that and understand what.
I think mobility work is pretty misunderstood by a lot of people. Like if you want to become more mobile meaning like movement, like you're moving through something. Flexibility will oftentimes be more so in a static position. Like, all right, what's the total range of motion? Like how far can you possibly go? And then mobility would be more so like how far can you possibly go with keeping everything stable, right? Without letting things become loose, like keeping your back active, right? Like you can go down into the bottom end of a squat. If you can keep your back tight, like that would be mobility. Going down into the bottom end of a squat and like letting your back collapse, but your hips got like a half an inch lower, that's flexibility.
Yeah. And that's kind of how I understood it as well, is you know, flexibility is your ability to be flexible, right?
Yeah.
Even though I'm using the term in the definition, which you really don't want to do, but it's basically but flexibility can actually also be a hindrance to mobility too. You can be overly flexible and not stable enough in those positions to.
So mobility is going to be a combination of flexibility and stability. When those two kind of come together, then that creates your mobility. So if you have an area that's weak, your body is going to be like, hey, it's not stable. We shouldn't go into that position with any type of load. And your body kind of like knows like, hey, if let's say you have poor squat mobility, you go to do a clean, your body's gonna be like, hey, don't get under this weight. Like, don't go there because I don't know if we could hold it. Yeah. Right. So it's like that's what happens.
You're gonna get some warning signs first, probably. Right?
Yeah. Like
before you fall apart.
A lot of times people will like called like clarking a lift, where you just do the pull and then you never attempt to get under it. I find that happens a lot of people who don't have a fully established bottom position, and then they end up being like, their body's like, yo, don't catch this, like don't get under it.
I do that sometimes. I'm going to tell you, I absolutely get to that point sometimes where I'm like, okay, I'm going to try this, but once I feel it, I'm like, it's just not going to happen today. So I dump out of it without even trying to do the catch at the bottom.
Yeah. And then when it comes to mobility, also like understanding that it exists kind of along a spectrum of how we work it, right? So if you have an area that's crazy tight, like terrible flexibility, like terrible mobility in that area, then it's like, hey, some static stretching, some foam rolling, like you can increase your mobility doing that. You can see an improvement. If you have really good mobility, doing some static stretching is probably not going to be the most beneficial, right? Yeah. So everything we do is kind of deemed as appropriate or inappropriate. So like I have great hamstring flexibility. I'm 250 pounds and I could do a split. When I was over 300 pounds, I could still do a split. Like,
I used to blow people away too, man. When you come into the gym, you'd be like, hey, I bet you I could do a split. And you're like, and they're like, no way.
I would do like a cartwheel into a split and be like, yeah, cool. I was 315 pounds.
Yeah, but it's interesting seeing a guy that was your size at that point being able to be that much, have that much mobility and flexibility. I mean, it was just, it's crazy. It was crazy.
So when it came to that, it's like, all right, my hamstrings are flexible. If I stretch my hamstrings, I could have gone down, like I could palm the ground. I probably could have fell asleep in that position. It's not beneficial for me. I'm not becoming more mobile. Not that I would have to in that area, but if I wanted to, then I need to go into that position with some load. And it's kind of like, all right, you could do soft tissue work and then going into like a static stretch and then going into maybe like a dynamic stretch or a movement stretch. Like it kind of keeps going, right? So I'll give the example using like an overhead squat or a snatch, right? So if you want to become more mobile for snatching, you could do some stretches, but it's not very specific to snatching. Most people have difficulty with the overhead squat. So it's like, if we're going to go along that spectrum and get to the ability to do the movement, to have the mobility
You
to
have
do
to
a
do
snatch.
the overhead squat, right?
Yeah. So before we even get to that, it's like, all right, some soft tissue work, loosen up your thoracic spine so you can get overhead. It's like, cool. Like, if you do that, you might be in a better position. If you're already like kind of good with that, the next kind of thing would be like, maybe we're doing a static stretch of a like a down dog type position where you're pushing your head through or going, and then doing like a dynamic stretch, like a pass through, kind of going through those things and getting more and more specific to the lift. Like a pass through doesn't look very much like a snatch, but it looks more like one than a down dog, and it looks more like one than a
So get closer and closer
ball.
to the movement.
And then after that, it's like, all right, maybe we go into doing some like wall angels where you put your back up against the wall, you get your lower back on the wall, hands on your, like, try to get your elbows against the wall and then press overhead.
Yep.
And then that's working your T-spine of getting overhead without letting your ribs flare, so that you're
So
not,
your ribs aren't coming.
yeah, because you
out.
want the
A lot
mobility.
of people do that. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's like, hey, this area is a little bit more flexible. We can give there as opposed to giving in the spot that we should.
But ultimately, that puts you in a pretty bad position for catching
it puts it puts your shoulders in a compromised position, and it also
Yeah.
puts your lower back into a kind of overarched position.
Yeah.
And you can get away with it for a while, but
Till the loads get heavy enough.
and then it's like, okay, I can't do anymore because my shoulders aren't going to be strong enough in this weaker position.
Yeah.
Then from there, it's like, all right, maybe you're doing something like a banded overhead squat where you put a band around your hips and you set it like real low, and then I think we've done that. You had that as like the first thing in your program.
Oh yeah, it was definitely one of those things where you were like, every time you come in the gym, you need to spend time doing this.
Yeah,
and I was like, okay, all right,
because that's also going to be with the band that's like kind of pulling you forward into the position where, like, if you're more
it forces
upright,
you back on your heels. It forces you to kind of get better in position where everything's in line.
Yeah, it forces your hips into a better position, because if you can be more upright when you squat, you don't need as much
strength,
like enough shoulder mobility to get back there.
Yeah.
So if your hips are more under you, you're more up and down. You don't need to get as far back with the bar.
Well, it's actually a simple philosophy when you think about it, stacking it up straight instead of stacking it up curved.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's like most of the lifts I'll tell you, most of the lifts I fail because, well, there's a couple reasons, but the main reason is catching it too forward.
Oh, yeah.
Catching it out here instead of back far enough. And a lot of that's a mobility thing, because my shoulders tend to push forward. And, I've been working thoracic spine mobility for a long time trying to get that correct. And it's still, still pushes. It depends on the day, but still pushes forward.
It takes just as much effort to work, like to do mobility properly, as it does to get stronger. Like the same effort towards strength training can be applied towards mobility. It's the same thing that we want our muscles to adapt. So it's like, we want them to become bigger and stronger, and we want them to become like more mobile. Like, it's the same thing that needs to adapt.
Yeah.
It might take just as much work, just as much time to see that much of an improvement. But like, a lot of people would just be like, well, I stretched and then I went to snatch. Like, if you're really mobile, snatching can be a form of mobility. Like, you could do a complex that's it's like a snatch plus overhead squat with a pause in the bottom,
or a 3-position snatch or something like that.
And just working through it
very
and
light.
like hitting the positions properly. Like, that could be mobility work. I like to do because I've decent shoulder mobility and a like pretty good bottom position in my Olympic lift. So like, if I want to work on mobility, sometimes I'll do squat jerks, right? Because that's going to force me into a position that's harder to do. But if I can get that and handle that with weight, when I go to do a split jerk, I have the stability in my shoulders. I have the mobility to get low into that position. So it's like, all right, cool.
Yeah,
like,
it's not that much of a jump at that point. You already
so
been
like
used to doing that.
A squat jerk doesn't look anything like stretching and foam rolling, but it is still mobility work. So it can be applied in a bunch of different ways. But yeah, that's something I feel like a lot of people miss out on, of like movement to get better at mobility.
Well, yeah, and you get into that piece where that's where the mobility comes in, and the mobility in especially in Olympic lifting is so important. I was just reading an article actually on your blog, Olympic lifting and gymnastics, and how they're and you kind of do this whole thing where you talk about CrossFit, you talk about the whole piece. Do you want to expand on that a little bit? How is Olympic lifting like gymnastics?
Oh, it's like the same thing.
It was a great article.
I think it's pretty obvious.
Great piece of, yeah.
No,
I enjoyed reading it.
Yeah. So when I started doing CrossFit, I was fortunate with the gym I was at. There was someone there who was like an elite level gymnast at one point, and so like friends with him, and we kind of like traded where I'm like, I'll help you with Olympic lifting, you help me with gymnastic stuff, because I was like
talking about Jamie.
You met Jamie.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
Yeah, so like he was helpful where it helped me to develop my eye when it came to gymnastics, and then so
it's her. She'll be fine.
Yeah,
lay down. All right, just ignore her. She'll be all right.
So.
Go lay down. All right.
So when I was working on gymnastics at the time, I was like 315 pounds, and I'm like, why can't I do a muscle up? They're like, well, you're 315 pounds. I'm like, no excuses. I want to be able to do it. So like I was like working on.
Let me grab her real quick and throw her outside.
But yeah, when I started CrossFit, I was at my heaviest. I was 316 pounds. I was an offensive lineman in college, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna get good at body weight movements. There's no reason, no excuse to be like, it doesn't matter how much I weigh. Given it's harder, it's like we don't teach someone to snatch with a 300-pound barbell.
Yeah.
Like we're like, oh, learn it from here. It's highly technical, but we're gonna start with 300 pounds. But kind of that was my intro into more gymnastics work, and I was very fortunate to have him like help me out with the gymnastics movements, and seeing the connections to my Olympic lifts helped me to understand it quicker. Because I started applying that because we had in football there's like 1,000 plays in the playbook, like any possible different variation where it's like, oh, well, if they're lined up like this is like that.
If something moves just a little bit, you got something else going on.
Yeah. And they did a good job teaching us all the different possibilities, because we use something called like same as teaching, where it's like, all right, this is the same as this, except this slight change. So it helps you to think kind of laterally, where it's like, oh, it's exactly the same except for this small difference. So it's like, if you look at a clean and a box jump, they're essentially the same movement, right? You're going to go down to what would be similar to your hang position in a clean, like you're loading up for the box jump, and then you're going to explode up and stand up as fast as you can, and then you're going to land in a squat.
Yeah.
So a clean is a jump, a land, and a squat.
Yeah.
Now, slight difference, it's not an air squat or body weight squat that it would be on a box, it's a front squat.
With weight.
Yeah, with weight. So it's like, it's a heavy box jump.
Yeah.
And if you can even correlate it to different weights with different heights for the box jump, as I go higher in a box jump, I have to land lower into my squat.
Yeah.
As I go heavier in weight, I can't pull it as high. I have to get lower into my squat.
Yeah.
So it's essentially the same movement in that regard. And then a similar type of thing happens where it's like, if you look at snatch and muscle ups.
Yeah.
That like aggressive hip extension, that turnover, and then ending up above the bar.
Yeah.
Like if you look at ring muscle up, ending in the bottom end of a dip is very similar to the bottom end of a squat, right? Like your upper body, if you look at your arms, like your elbows, like where your knees are, like that type of kind of correlation there, where it's a very similar movement. If you look at it that way, it's like, all right, fast hip extension, and then I have to stand up from the squat, I have to stand up from the dip, and just seeing the connection there. And that also leads to the same kind of idea from a program design aspect of how do we get better at Olympic lifting? How do we get better at gymnastics? Yeah. So one kind of point is raising your, like you could either get stronger so you could lift the weight no problem, and do the movement no problem for gymnastics, or you become more efficient. Now, some people end up kind of working way too much one side or way too much the other.
Yeah.
So it's like,
not balancing it. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, all right, I want to be able to clean 225. It's like, all right, how much do you squat? 205. I'm like, all right, well,
that's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen unless you have a crazy deadlift, and then you end up power cleaning it. But that's, like we said earlier, it's like not the most efficient way. So it's like, all right, well, you can get stronger. You can also work on technique at the same time to raise the percentage of your base you're able to lift. Right. Some people will work too much on strength. They're like, well, if I squat 405, I should be able to clean 225. If you squat 405 and only clean 225, you kind of suck at cleans. You should be able to clean far more. So it's like working on one or the other. And I remember I kept trying to explain that to you when it came to gymnastics, because again, when I started endorphin, I was like, I don't know, 275 pounds. And I would challenge you in gymnastic stuff where you were able to do like 50 unbroken deficit handstand push-up. Like, it was an absurd.
That's kind of my wheelhouse, those things. But,
so you would be able to do that stuff. And I'm like, why? I should not be better than you at this. Like, how come I can do this, like, weird, like the kip, like a gymnastics kip where it's inverted and then going above the rings? I'm like, how come I can do this and you can't? You're far better than me. Body weight movements. And I tried to use that as an example as I was coaching you to like be like, no, work on technique, work on efficiency. You could become ridiculous at gymnastics. So it's like you need to work on both.
And eventually I got the message. I got a lot better at all that stuff, because it was like, and you'd mentioned Jamie coming in. Seeing Jamie do stuff was just like,
it's like
freak of nature.
It's like annoying. He was doing
he's annoying motherfucker.
He was doing like a demoing like kipping and pull-ups and stuff like that one time. And he's hanging from the bar, staying in like the hollow body position, and he takes one hand off the bar, and he's like, now if you look here, and he points to the area. I think he was showing up, but he was like, if you look here, nothing else moved. He just took one hand off the bar, pointed. He's like, now look how active I am here, and then he like put his hand back on. I'm like, you could just casually go one hand and have nothing move.
He was ridiculous. I mean, it was I remember the day that I got. I was playing around. I was doing inverted handstands on the rings. I could do the flip around and get over there. Of course, I do it the CrossFit way, where my feet are around the.
Oh yeah, he does it without his feet on
the bands going up to the ceiling, and he just gets up there and he's just like, okay, but this is what it should look like, and he just goes and puts it, and like he's up there just completely inverted freestand handstand on the rings. I was like,
I saw him do a handstand box jump. Like we put mats, and he was like, all right, I'm gonna go on my hands and try and jump, and like he jumped onto a box from a handstand position. That's not.
That would be a broken neck for me. That's what that would be. If I tried.
I'm like, I can't do that.
I mean, I could do a lot of cool stuff, like the deficit stuff. Definitely. I mean, I think the most I did was like I literally can get the weights like in the deficit to where you just can't go any further. And still do the strict push up, but. There's a lot of things that I'm not good at. Like you give me a barbell, I still struggle with a barbell in my technique. Things, and I think it's, in CrossFit, that's one of the things that's great about CrossFit. And I think I read that in the article too, is, CrossFit's the probably the most difficult sport because in a few different ways, because you have to be not only good technically at multiple things, you have to have strength and you have to have endurance. And you have to have all of those things. It's not sport specific. I mean, you have to be able to do 100 double unders and then go right in and do a squat clean of like 315 or whatever the weight is.
So it's the least specific sport. It's like, hey, anything.
Do whatever you want. We'll call it CrossFit. Now they got shooting. So
it's really just like general strength and conditioning. To a like kind of extreme with that of like being prepared for any possible athletic scenario. So it's like, all right, you need to be strong. You need to be explosive. You need to be fast. You need to be able to do something for a long period of time. You need to be able to do it accurately. You need to be able to have coordination. Like, so blending those all together gets far more complicated because it's like they're not always conducive or like compatible in a way. So it's like being able to express power is not physically similar to like running 10 miles. Like that's why like if you look at if you were to take a like very high level marathon runner and had them do like a max effort 1 mile run.
Yeah.
It's not that much faster than their pace.
Yeah.
For their
because they're
it's like, hey, I'm really good at going at
source.
90%, 95% of my effort, and
Yeah.
I could just maintain it forever.
Yeah.
So it's like finding a way to like get the high ends of both, and kind of blending those.
Well, taking the
properly.
energy sources. I mean, I think when I was training with you, it was a lot of looking at, I think, 3 different time modalities we spent time on. Right? You got the short, which was
So when I did like for the group classes, we kind of because I did the programming at Endorphin there, and we would kind of break it down and blend we essentially apply a training split for conditioning as well, right? Because I use the example a lot of people of like, you see a lot of people go to the gym and it's like, all right, it did 45 minutes on the treadmill.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, like from a program design aspect, that's equivalent to going to the gym and maxing out bench press every day.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like you're doing the same thing at the same intensity.
And your body's going to adjust to it.
Your body's going to adapt to it, and then it's not going to make any further beneficial adaptations. So it's like,
plateau,
okay,
and that's it.
Yeah. So in order to make progress, you need to get a variety when it comes to conditioning amongst different time domains, because you need to be able to express different levels of power.
Yep.
Same thing when it comes to lifting. Like if you always lift the same weight for the same amount of reps, eventually you get used to it, and you get really good at doing that for 10, and then you add a little bit of weight, and you can't do any more, or like whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So same idea with when it comes to conditioning. It's like, you can maintain a pace for half an hour or whatever, but if you had to do something 100% effort for like 15 seconds, how tired are you after that? If you look at someone who's very, very good, they're exhausted.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like you look at Usain Bolt do a race, it takes him 9 seconds, and then he gets interviewed and he's like, it was great. Like he's talking, it's like he's exhausted. He did 9 seconds.
Yeah.
It's like, do you have the...
But he was at 100.
Yeah. So
full out.
Having that ability to express that much power in a short duration of time is a skill in and of itself.
Yeah.
So it's like you do one thing for that short, you should be able to express that. You should also be able to maintain a little bit slower pace for a longer period of time. So you might find like, hey, I'm great at long duration stuff, but when it comes to short duration stuff, I just can't move that fast. It's like, all right, you need to work on it. Like, you need to work on expressing power.
Yeah. And your body gets used to, if you're used to, like, let's say you do all long duration stuff. Like a lot of people get into that. They get into like the 40-minute long duration kind of circuit training, kind of working out, and not. Your body gets used to moving at that speed, that kind of slower pace. So when you're asked to do something like a workout like Fran, where you're talking about
like
anywhere
a 2-3
from
minute workout,
2 to 4 minute workout for someone who's in pretty good condition. And they really hit a wall on that. I mean, I see people who are used to those longer workouts start to put up, and there's everybody has their starting point. I think my first Fran time was like 9 minutes years ago.
I don't know what my first one was.
But it was awful. I did a terrible Fran time, but it's improved dramatically since then. But the thing is that people get used to moving at that pace. Then you put them in a workout where it's going to be like, okay, go.
Yeah.
Because that's it. That's all you can do here when you got a 21-15-9 workout or a 30 reps for time type workout. It's just go. It's just go until you can't go.
Yeah. Like those type of workouts that are in that like kind of 2 to 5 minute range.
They're the worst.
Like unders,
they're the worst.
They're scary. There's some that I'm like, I don't know if I ever want to do that again. But it's like, if you did it a little slower, it's like not like my example, 500 meter row. I don't know if I ever want to do that as a test again. Like my best 500 meter is 119, and like I do that, and then
that's a crazy speed.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to do it again.
500 meter row.
But it's like if I did that in a 135 pace, which is still pretty quick, I'd be like, I'm fine.
Yeah, you'd be okay with that.
But it's like sprinting all out sprint.
Sprinting is a lot hard. I mean, to me, there's a difference between just saying, okay, I'm going to go get the work done, and getting the work done and say, okay, I'm going to do this work in like 3 minutes. Yeah.
I like to use the because I think I've mentioned this before to you before, where it's like some workouts, it's like, all right, you don't want to crash and burn off the gate, because then it's like, hey, this should take you like 8 minutes, but you crash and burn at minute 4, and then everything slows down, takes you 12 minutes or whatever. But there's some workouts where you want to crash and burn and let your wreckage kind of tumble through the finish line. Like Fran is that type of workout where it's like crash and burned at 2 minutes, but I just kept pushing and I finished at 2:31 or whatever.
And that's where the term Fran lung comes from.
Oh, yeah.
Fran lung. CrossFitters know that. I mean, I get that from a few different workouts.
I got that from last time I did Karen. 150 wall balls per time. Because I did it.
Well, you just
did it
straight through, right?
I did it unbroken in 3:48.
Yeah, which is insane. That's
and
an
it's
insane
like
time on that.
I walked around for 40 minutes going like, yeah, I finished it. I went unbroken. I don't know if you guys did, but yeah, did you see? I was pretty awesome. And I just like, I was like, I don't know if I'll ever do that one again. Because I'm like, I don't want to do it.
No, that's, anything where you get into like that and you're saying, I'm just going to go unbroken. I'm going to fly through it. I'm going to go hard as I can. Those are the scariest workouts to me.
Oh, for sure.
Those are the scariest ones. I mean, even Grace for me, it's like, it's like, you know what? Grace, I know I'm going to move fast. I'm going to get it done in probably about 3 minutes.
Those type of workouts were like always my best. Was those like, I'm going to stand in one spot. I'm going to have to
not
move
going to go too far.
Yeah, like Karen, I'm like, I plant my feet. I don't move them. And then Grace was the first CrossFit workout I ever did.
Was it?
Yeah.
But that's like right in your ballpark.
Oh, yeah.
Give you a 135-pound barbell. You're like, this is a twig, man.
And I was like, so the first CrossFit workout I did was Grace. I did it in 2:18.
Okay.
And that was like first time ever doing that. I'm like, okay, I could do CrossFit. I went and got my level 1 like a week later. It was 2 weeks into CrossFit. I already had my level shirt. 1. Yeah. I mean, I was like going to start coaching at this place because I had an Olympic lifting, powerlifting background. But it was like, I was like, oh, I could do this. And then not that long later, I was like, Murph is what? I was like, that took me 80 minutes. Because I was coming off of football where the average time is 6 seconds of going and then 24-second rest. So I was super good
at sprinting out.
At sprinting. I was like, I was super explosive and fast, like coming off of that. But I'm like, I gotta do something for an hour.
Yeah. See, I was just the opposite coming into CrossFit. I was an endurance athlete coming into CrossFit. So it was like, for me, those long workouts were where my breath, I was good at those because I knew how to manage my energy sources to kind of be okay through those workouts. But then when I got into those short ones, is like that was where like my body was used to moving in a slower pace, so I wasn't used to doing that.
I would always game stuff. Like I always, every time I do any type of conditioning workout, I game it where I plan out like what my score is going to be, and I do the math to figure out ahead of time, and I spend half the time during the workout like checking the clock to see if I'm on pace. Like I'm like, I got to do a round every 48 seconds in order to blah blah blah, like whatever, and like I do well with that. It also keeps me like mentally, I'm not focused on like, man, I'm tired. But I game it, figure out the score I want to get, and then like strategize the whole time where I'm like, all right, I'm not going to end up getting 10 rounds on this. I'm going to shoot for 9. So if I slow down the pace or pull it back here, whatever it may be. But like, there's some workouts like I would game it when I started because I had that kind of quick explosive conditioning, but then like short recovery time. So I do like 5 burpees. Take a break. 5 burpees. Take a break. And then it would end up averaging. Because you
could recover in quick.
Yeah. So it would end up averaging to a decent time. But it's like, okay, what would be better if I could work on like getting my pace appropriate to that, and that took me some time. And
well, that's like when the CrossFit Games in the Open, they did I remember, I think it was the first year I competed in the Open was. 7 minutes of burpees.
Oh, yeah.
It was freaking awful. It was the most awful thing ever.
You can't, those type of workouts.
It was just, I didn't stop. I just was like, and I gamed it. I said, okay, I need to do this many per minute for 7 minutes to make, but
to get the score you wanted.
After about the first 3 minutes, I was already like, shit.
I'm way off.
I'm way off pace now. I got to move. And I just, by the end of it, I remember laying on the ground going, what the hell?
Yeah.
It was terrible.
Yeah.
I don't remember what the score was that I got, but it was definitely, like I said, I just kept going through the whole thing. And that's the hardest thing. I mean, literally, burpees are one of my favorite movements. They're awful. But literally, if you break it down in this way, and I tell people, it's just falling on the ground and getting up.
Yeah.
It's really what it is. It's
burpees aren't that difficult. And one of the things that ends up happening a lot with burpees, what makes them more difficult, a lot of people end up having bad technique on burpees.
Yeah.
And like, if you look at it from, we talked about a bunch of times from, and I wrote an entire article on it of like improving conditioning through technique.
Yep.
Because if you view it as a like cost, like every rep has a cost of energy.
This is one of my favorite analogies that you gave me a long time ago. That definitely explain that now, because I that analogy with the cost. I think you'd said if I spend a quarter and you spend a dime or something like that.
Yeah, it's if you view it in that way, like the math ends up being fairly complicated with this, but like your body does the math and figures it out. So it's like you don't have to do this. But if you think of it in this way, like, all right, every movement has a cost, right? Yeah. So if a burpee costs 1, right? So you have the ability to express however many, based on your conditioning, like how much can you express in a minute and maintain that? So it's like, all right, maybe I can express 30, right? Yeah. In a minute and maintain that. But it's like, if I'm doing my burpees efficiently, each one costs me 1, right? If I'm doing them inefficiently, maybe it costs me 1.5.
Yeah.
All right. So it's like, now I can no longer do 30 in a minute. I can only do, what is that, like 20 or something like that.
Let's say you have an overall capacity of 50.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what you come out, that high number is what you're...
So it's like your rate that you're going at is now, you're doing 1 burpee every however many seconds. That costs 1.5. And it's like, by the end of it, it's like you did 20, but you spent 30 on those same amount of work.
Yeah.
So it's like, all right, well, from a score standpoint, it's worse because you're not able to express that properly. So it's like working on being efficient and not wasting energy. So a lot of people on burpees, they end up kind of squatting down. So they like bend their knees a little bit too much. Instead of just dropping, keeping their legs relatively straight and like hopping their feet back. It's like, all right, you squatted down, so you get down to the ground, you jump back, you jump up, and you land kind of in a squat, and you stand up. Right? So now every burpee you do has an air squat.
Yeah.
So it's like, hey, you did 30 burpees, but it was 30 burpees and 30 air squats.
Yeah.
I can do 30 burpees faster than I can do 30 burpees and 30 air squats.
Yeah,
like, it would be like...
it's inefficient movement.
It's like running a mile and doing 5 laps instead of 4 and being like, I don't know why it's slower. It's like, you did
more work,
25% more work. Like, why?
More
like,
work,
of course.
Yeah.
Yes. And like the same thing, talk about it with Karen. Like 150 wall balls for time. Letting the ball drop from, like, instead of catching it up high and letting it drop down to your waist. So it's like, all right, that's like a foot.
Yeah.
So if you let it drop a foot and you have to bring it back up a foot, that's an extra foot of work per wall ball. You have 150. That's 150 extra feet of work. That's half a football field of extra work. So that's 150 extra feet. That would be equivalent to like 15 extra wall balls, right? Just off of that one inefficiency. So it's like 160.
You start
5
multiplying that, it adds
right?
up.
So like it adds up to all that stuff where it's like 2 feet per thing. So it's like 180 wall balls that you just did instead of 150. You could finish 150 faster than 180.
Yeah.
So it's like, all right, that hurt your time. And maybe that pushes you over the edge of what pace you can maintain. And that's when you end up like kind of crashing a little bit. So it's like, I need to take a break to catch back up.
Yeah, we see that all the time with, inefficient movement will definitely eat up your energy sources, and you'll definitely, get to a point where you'll just burn out. We see it all the time, and especially in fairly new people in the CrossFit world, they come in and they're learning the movements, they're learning stuff, they're making the mistakes everybody makes.
Yeah,
is what happens. I see it a lot with wall balls. Matter of fact, with catching it out here, catching it in just bad positions, and most of the time, people see it and start to correct it, but it takes time for the person.
Yeah, and you also have to be conscious of it.
Yeah, you have to know about it. People don't know. I mean, they come in, and like we were talking about earlier, is CrossFit's one of those things where you have to be good at a lot of things.
Yeah.
And most people, when they come into the gym, you got to remember, a lot of the people that come into CrossFit come in because they hear about CrossFit, say it's a good way to get in shape, it's a good way to get fit, and it is. And, they come in and they have to be taught all these things because they probably, a lot of them haven't done a whole lot of working out, in maybe many years, some people,
Yeah.
I had the opportunity, it was great. I had the opportunity to interview a guy named Carl. out in the island of Bonaire. He was doing the CrossFit Open. He was one of the oldest people. He was the third oldest person doing it. He was 87, I think, at the time doing the Open. And it was just amazing. The guy was one of those very inspirational people, But he came in and he had to learn, he's always been a physical kind of guy. He's always been a little bit athletic, but he had to learn CrossFit. And to see someone that age competing in the Open, really makes me think, what's your excuse, right? A lot of people have excuses as to why they're not exercising, why they're not working out, whether it's time or they don't have the energy to do it. Or, one of the biggest things I hear is I need to get in shape before I go do CrossFit. And that's like ridiculous to me.
Yeah.
I hear that all the time though.
Yeah.
Going back into, one of the things I really wanted to talk about, strength training.
Yeah.
Strength training. Now, I just came off of a huge cycle of Russian step training. I'm sure you're familiar with step training. Keep the load, just so anybody knows, you keep the load the same for a long period of time, but you vary the reps. So it might be 80%, six cycles of 2 for the first day. Then on day 2, it's basically, it might be the same, but it might go up. It depends. The program is pretty interesting. By the end of it, you're actually doing more than your previous, because the last couple weeks they bring the weight up. So it's pretty interesting though. It blew my strength up. What is your favorite? I don't know if there is a favorite, but what do you think about strength programs and what do you kind of, go with at this point?
So there's a lot of different things that kind of contribute to, like, the first thing that should frame everything is what's the goal. Like, if your goal is to run a 5K, doing Olympic lifting, strict program, it doesn't, like, everything is either appropriate or inappropriate. So
yeah.
The first thing that needs to frame how you design a program is what's the goal. All right, so you want to get stronger. Cool. Then you need to assess and see what do we need to do to get stronger. And I kind of have a framework of how I go about assessing something. Is like, first off, like, can they or can't they do something, right? So it's like, can they do it? Yes. Cool. Move on. Like, they could do it. Move on. Then it's like, all right, no, they can't do it. Then also, does it matter? I can't do a backflip. Well, does it matter? No, because I want to squat more.
Yeah.
I don't need to be able to do a backflip. Cool, move on. But now let's say, like, yeah, it does matter. Then it's, all right, are they tired? Or, like, are they, are they aware? Like, if I cue them and tell them, like, hey, stop bending your arms early in the clean. It's like, oh, I just didn't realize. And then you fix it.
Yeah.
It was just like a lack of awareness of, like, oh, squat lower, sit back on your heels. It's like, can they fix it from awareness? Then it becomes like, are they tired? Like, can they do it for fewer reps? Like, can they do it for 1 rep? It's like, okay, then they could do it properly for 1 rep. And then it's kind of going down the line of, like, all right, are they tired? It's like, are they strong enough? Could they do the movement with less weight? And then once I go through all those, then it's like, all right, is it mobility? Can they do it in a variation where it requires less mobility? And then last up, if it's like not really necessarily mobility, it's like, all right, is there something more serious going on here? Is there an injury? Like, do I need to?
For some reason they're not getting.
Yeah. So it's like, do I need to tell them to go see someone else?
Yeah.
And I kind of go through those of, like, all right, what's really going on? So coming from that, also assessing, it's like, what level are they at? Right. So if I take someone who's like, I've never worked out, I want to get stronger. Cool. Like, show up to the gym. You get stronger. Like, and it's like kind of assessing, like, where they are kind of along the path. Are they beginner, intermediate, advanced? Yeah. Typically what I'll do with beginners is we'll focus on movement because
spend time just doing the even lightweight stuff.
So kind of going with it, like, kind of also frames it is how much volume, how much stuff we need to do. So there's different kind of factors that need to be taken into account. One is max recoverable volume. So that's like, how much can they handle in a given week? How many sets per week can they handle? Yeah, what can they do? So there's like a bunch of math kind of involved of, like, all right, how much can you handle? How much can they do? Yeah. Then there's also minimum effective volume. So it's like, how much volume do they need to see progress? And then also minimum volume, like maintenance volume.
What about recovery? And I mean, recovery times in there obviously as well, right? So you got
Okay. So like set up kind of like within the week, and that's max recoverable volume is like how much. If they go over this number, likelihood of getting injured drastically.
And they're probably not going to come in for a couple days.
It's that kind of frames recovery as well, and like we can get into like recovery for like sports recovery if you want to get into that. But when it comes to designing someone's program, like kind of assessing which one I want them to do, I kind of have to take into account like and do the math to figure out where these numbers are going to be. With a beginner, it's low numbers in order to get the minimum effective volume, max adaptive volume. Like what can they make the biggest improvements from? So it's like, cool, that number's low. Let's take some time to work on our movement and get better from that perspective, because you're going to get stronger, you're going to get better just showing up to the gym. So let's set ourselves up for the future. If I have someone who's more advanced, then we need to get more specific where it's like, hey, what the math kind of breaks down. Like there's a science of what exactly is going to be the most beneficial. And then everything else is just strategies to get closer to that. So like following a program like the STEP program, it's like, all right, it's something that's interesting, can keep you moving at a high enough intensity. It allows you to recover from week to week. Like it might be like, hey, it ends up adhering roughly to these what the science shows is effective, but it's like, hey, it's 89% in line with what's ideal. Like, cool, you're gonna make progress. As you get further along, you need to get more and more specific, closer to that 100%. So I usually follow a lot of what the science says, and then I'll go off of their individual differences. Where it's like, I was coaching someone who was had like a crazy long Wednesday, where it's like she was like working as a nurse and was like doing a double shift where it's like 16-hour day. It's like, well, technically it would have been ideal recovery from this day to you should be squatting again on Wednesday. It's like, no, you don't work out on Wednesday. Do it on Thursday.
You're stressed out. You're not going to function
it's like,
well.
Well, it's like there's not enough hours in the day for her. It's like she was off on Thursday, even though it says like what the science says of like when she should be recovered by. It's like, no, like move the stuff around to fit for the person.
Listen to your body. You got to listen to yourself too, right? Is that, I mean, I follow that a lot, and sometimes I don't. I throw it out the window. But I know for myself too, if I'm, stress plays a big part in it too. Like if you have a job that's stressful and you're working all day and you have a whole lot, you can go into the gym, it could be a shit show. Even though everything says you should be performing right. Because you just had a bad day. That's
something that kind of goes into it, where it's like, all right, there's individual differences. There's things that affect your ability to recover and how much volume you can handle. And like stress is a factor towards it. So it's like the number in the math still exists, where it's like, all right, there's a certain amount of sets per week you can handle. You have higher stress, that lowers the max amount of sets you can handle.
The number,
so it's like those numbers are kind of moving and adjusted based on like, oh, well, your nutrition was shitty, and then you stress at work and you didn't get enough sleep. It's like, all right, that number is lower. And that's why it's not like like the math still does exist.
The math's still there. It's just there's other forces at play. Sort of. I mean, I started wearing and I don't have it on now. You ever see the Whoop watch? The Whoop. Watches. I mean, it's not a watch actually. It's what it does. It kind of keeps
heart rate variability.
It checks your heart rate variability, and I got a dashboard I can go on online, and it tells me, hey, you're going to perform this way today, and I found it to be pretty close to accurate. I can't say it's 100% because there's days where I've been like, they weren't right about that one, but for a lot of it though, it'll kind of give me some pretty interesting information. I mean, it's one of those things though. It's a smart. It's one of those intelligent applications. So the more you use it, the smarter it gets, kind of, and it knows you better, and it starts to gauge your body a little bit more. I mean, there's a bunch of them now too that you can get. I know Fitbit's really working on their design with heart rate variability as well. But that's a big, it's the big thing now. And part of me says, well, is it just the big thing right now, and it's going to be gone in a year or two, and something else will be there that people are utilizing? Because there's always the fitness community is one of those communities that I love the fitness community, but we like to grab onto stuff sometimes, and we're like, hey, this is good. Like paleo, that came out a while back. and really hit the fitness community pretty heavy. And then everybody was paleo for a while. And then, everybody kind of realized, hey, maybe this is not such a good stay on this forever kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, with a lot of this stuff, it's like, all right, take a second, think rationally, like, all right,
sometimes we're not good at that.
It's like, does it, yeah. It's like, all right, does this work? And it's like, also, it's like, why does this work?
Yeah.
Right? So, when it comes to that, it's like, all right, does paleo work? It's like, well, for some people it ends up working. What do they end up eating? It's like, all right, they end up eating a little bit less processed foods. Their calories end up being less. They end up losing weight. It's like, it's not magic that it's like, oh, these certain foods and eliminating dairy. It's like, no, like you adhered to
but if you think
the
about
fundamentals closer, like incidentally, because it's like, hey, this paleo, it ends up lining up with 75% of what's considered ideal, and you were only eating 60% of what's ideal before. Now you see progress,
a bigger majority of what's ideal, and and that's the thing. And the strict paleo is an interesting animal. I mean, I did it for a while, and I was a subscriber full out for a minute, more than a minute actually, but it's one of those things where and it worked. It did what it was supposed to do. But it's one of those things where I believe, like Chris Kresser wrote in your personal paleo code, it's one of those things that's more of a starting point to figure out what your body likes and what it doesn't like. So you go clean, and go paleo, and do that for a period of time, and then start to introduce some things back in and see how your body reacts to it.
And that makes sense. Like take some time to figure out what works for you.
Exactly, and that's pretty much what that is. But staying on it for a long time was not a good thing for me, because you got to think about what is it actually doing when you go full out paleo, right? And this is just me talking. I'm not a scientist. I'm not an expert in this in any way. I'm just somebody who has some personal experience and has looked at a lot of data related to it. And it basically puts your body into somewhat of a ketosis, right? Which basically makes your body think it's starving, right? To some degree.
Yeah, I mean, what typically happens is people who focus on diet, they end up making slightly healthier choices, which then they end up eating less calories. Yeah. So it's like, all right, you eat less calories, you lose
become
weight.
deficient in the calories.
A lot of when it comes to like the science, when it comes to nutrition, from a like performance standpoint, from a body composition standpoint, like the science is pretty settled on like what has the biggest impact, what is actually effective, and then all the new stuff that comes out is like, it's just a variation to try and get closer to what's ideal based on like what's able to be adhered to, right? So if it's like you have someone that's like, all right, I need these strict rules to not eat this and not eat that. It's like, okay, well, if you have that strict rule kind of set in your head, then you're like, no, I can't eat cheese, so I'm not going to have pizza. It's like, all right, well, it makes it easier to say no to pizza, so it's like you're not. I had pizza last night, but it makes it kind of easier.
I think I did too, actually.
Yeah, it makes it easier, so it's like, all right, if that's something you need to stick to, then it's like, cool, like whatever that may be. And like the same thing happens with intermittent fasting, where it's like, all right, you can only eat for a certain window of time. It's like you have less time to eat, you eat less food. Yeah, like that's all that really is happening when it's effective for people.
Yeah,
but I could eat, I don't know how many thousands of calories I could eat in a single meal. Like I used to take Ben and Jerry's and just melt them in the microwave and drink them like milkshakes. And I had 3 of those. And I'm like,
awful, man.
Oh, it was great. I miss being fat and happy.
Fat and happy? Is that what you're saying?
I miss it. But no, that's.
Are you thin and miserable now? Or no?
I'm kind of fat and moderately happy. No, it's something that needs to be taken into account. It's like, all right, what is actually causing this to work?
Yeah.
And could I make it simpler and like less stressful on me, where it's like, oh, I can't eat after this time. It's like, oh, I could, but whatever. Like you.
Yeah. It's just not going to be. Yeah, it's not, I mean, you could do. I mean, the thing I always, kind of subscribe to is, eating this or that here and there that's not 100% great for you isn't going to kill you. Yeah. 90% of the time, unless it's like cyanide. Don't eat that.
Yeah. Probably don't.
That will kill you. But I mean, you could stray off here and there and come back, and and I'll tell you, I've done my share of doing that. I've eaten very, very healthy for long periods of time, and then gone off on a 2-week tangent where I just eat anything I want. Yeah. Which ends up being not good, and then come back and nothing really terrible happened. I mean, it's not. My performance wasn't that good for a couple of days or 3 days, 4 days, but then
consistency is is probably the most important when it comes to diet. And when I graduated college, I was 316 pounds, and I was like, all right, I should lose weight, because I was seeing like what the records were in powerlifting and stuff like that, in the different weight classes. I'm like, all right,
if you drop weight, you're gonna.
If I drop weight, I'm close to that American record for the junior category. Like at the time, I was like, all right, I can get down to that. Yeah. And the weight classes kind of shifted, so I gotta lose more weight now. I was gonna get down to 275. Now I'm like, all right, get down to this. I'm like lined up, and I'm like, all right, now go weight 231 to compete there. But like kind of along that journey, I always like approached stuff very rationally and took the time to like learn as much as I could. Yeah. Got certified in nutrition and have been helping people with that. But a big part of it was like, all right, think rationally. Like if when it comes to diet, nutrition, in order to lose weight, it's entirely based on calories, right? So, and not entirely, but it is.
Well, it's the quality of the calories too that you put in,
that'll
right?
contribute, but like the biggest impact, like the entire determinant of gaining or losing weight is based on burning more calories than you take in, right?
Caloric deficiency.
Yeah, being in a caloric deficit in order to lose weight is mandatory. Yeah. Right now, when you go to lose weight, you want to optimize the ability to lose fat and not be losing muscle or losing anything else. So it's like, okay, like I need to make sure I'm having the right stuff in order to kind of prompt my body to retain muscle while using mostly fat, right? So that's when it's like, all right, now you should be conscious of macro breakdown, and then you're looking at timing of when you're having stuff, and
which gets you into like a periodization kind of.
Yeah, like you're applying what's most impactful. And when it comes to it, it's like you have to focus on calories first and kind of set your budget before you determine like, all right, what do I need to spend this budget on? Like I need to make sure I'm having enough protein, having enough fat, and like the most variable would be carbs. And typically you need you base the carbs on how much activity you have. So you're going through this and you're like, all right, I want to evenly spread out my food throughout the day so I have enough protein at any given time for protein turnover to help retain as much muscle as possible. So it's like you think about it rationally. It's not some magic thing of like you need apple cider vinegar and you're gonna do this, and then it's only you got to stop eating. You can eat from 1 to 3 as long as it's like it's not.
Yeah, you can make toast hard here. I mean,
it is far more complicated, but it's also not very complicated, because a lot of things that end up happening is like your body is adjusting.
Yeah, well, I think what we get to is it's a complex process, but to do it, you don't need to understand the whole process and get crazy with the complexities of it. It's just basically, hey, like you said, you break it down into eat less calories if you want to drop weight. Changing body composition, just change what you're putting in. Will change and make sure you're getting the correct exercise.
Yeah. And that's also why it's like I think it's important for people to understand the science when it comes to nutrition, because when things plateau, then you need to work towards what's closer to what's ideal, right? So analogy I give a lot of people that I work with is when it comes to nutrition is imagine you're taking a test every single day, and that test is like, all right, 50% of the test is true, false. It's your calories. 30% of the test is the multiple choice, and that's your macro breakdown. Then it's like, all right, 10% for fill in the blank is your timing, and then it's 10% for or 5% for like quality, 5% for supplements, hydration. That's an essay at the end. Don't even worry about that part. Like, just focus on the true false. So it's like, hey. I don't want to get 100% on this test on Monday if I'm only going to get a 50 on Tuesday. I'd rather get an 80 every day. I'm going to get a B, pass the class, cool. Yeah. So it's like a test you take every day.
Yeah, you don't want to be all over the place.
Yeah, so it's like consistency is more important there.
Same thing with exercise too. It's consistent. I mean, you can take that and apply that to a lot of things in life, right? Pretty much consistency is key. You want, if you want certain things to happen, it doesn't make sense for you to excel on one day and suck on the next, right? You got to kind of be consistent all the way across the board. Yeah. Even if it means working in a different manner, right? If it means working at, let's say, 70-80% rather than 100%.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, and like when it comes to the diet stuff, what I'll have people do is like we measure to see like kind of how consistent they're being. Where it's like, hey, I was eating about whatever guidelines we lay out, and it's like they fill in like fill in a chart, and then it's like, hey, we see at the end of the week, it's like, hey, we're about 75% consistent to this plan,
yeah,
and we lost a pound.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
The goal for next week 75%, and then it's like, all right, well, that also allows me from a coaching perspective to judge like, is it the plan that we're going off of that needs to change, or is it the strategies to adhere to it that we need to change in order to be successful? So it's like, all right, you got someone who stalls out with losing weight, and it's like they've stayed the same weight for the past 2 weeks. It's like, all right, what's going on? We look at consistency. It's like, 65%. All right, well, we need to get that higher.
Yeah.
And then if I have someone that's like, they were 94% consistent and they still didn't lose weight, it's like, all right, we need to update the plan. We need to make the plan
Change
closer to what's ideal.
Well, it's important to have the plan match what the person's capable of doing.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, you see that. I mean, the best way to fail, I think, in anything is to have a plan that is unrealistic for a person. And that'll just get people, way off on some other, they'll leave.
Yeah, and I've seen success with people where it's like they want to go to some extreme kind of thing where it's like, I'm only going to eat, I'm not going to eat
I'm going to eat kale all day long every day.
Yeah, it's like, all right, how long are you going to do that until you hate yourself? So like I've seen that where people are like, hey, you think I'll see a lot of times it's like, they skip breakfast and then they have a small lunch and then dinner. They're like, I'm starving and I have this. I'm like, I want you to just try
you just
a little
ate
something for
every
breakfast.
calorie you could at dinner.
Yeah, and then they're like, they ate so much at dinner that they wake up in the morning, they're not hungry, and then it happens again.
Dude,
so I've seen success with people where it's like, hey, let's try having this for breakfast. And they're like, yeah, and then I wasn't hungry. I did better, and I lost weight. I'm like, how hard was that?
Biggest lesson I've ever learned was don't go food shopping hungry.
Oh, yeah.
I did that last night, man, and I'm telling you, I got tons of garbage that I shouldn't have got.
Yeah, you end up at home, you're like, wow, how did I get this?
Who put this in my cart?
I've gone to Costco like that, and I have a year's supply of some type of chip or whatever.
that I've tried once that I don't even know if
I'm like, I'm not going to eat this.
That's great. Holy crap! But yeah, I mean, there's a whole bunch of things here, and it's a lot of I think it's most people, you should have somebody helping you work through this stuff, which is what you're doing.
Yeah.
Which is what your website does, is help people get fit. Whether it's somebody who's a competitive athlete or somebody who just wants to, as we talked, just wants to look good naked or wants to, just wants to be in physical shape for summertime, be able to wear a bathing suit and not feel embarrassed about it or get to a certain point. That you offer all that, right? You offer all those types of trainings. And I always tell people the difference, there's a difference between being a competitive athlete and being somebody who's just trying to get fit.
Yeah.
There's a big difference there. But it's all kind of built on a lot of the same models. It's just different levels of intensity, different levels of how much training you're doing.
Yeah.
For example, if you're somebody who just wants to get fit, pretty much just make some diet changes, some slight diet changes, and probably just work out 4 to 5 days a week, maybe, for an hour a day.
Yeah.
if that.
And I'll tell a lot of people that where it's like, all right, measure how much effort you're going to put in. Like when you go to do something, like, is it worth that level of effort? So it's like for some people, I'm start, and it's always good to kind of like ease things into it slow because like you want to buid up your work capacity.
You don't want to break somebody the first day they come in. They'll never come back. So
it's like, okay, and if you're doing like low, like hitting that minimum effective volume or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, we're seeing progress. Once you stop seeing progress, then all you need to do is turn up the effort a little bit more.
Yeah.
Right. So you increase your effort, you get a little more specific, and then you continue to see progress for the long term.
Yeah.
As opposed to like some people will be like, I'm going to do Smolov for squats.
Yeah.
And it's like, what do you do after that?
Yeah.
Like it's like 1,000 squats per week. It's like whatever it ends up being. It's like insane. It's like, okay, now it's like you got that level of effort. It's like, could you do more?
Yeah.
No,
No,
you can't do more.
Nobody can.
Yeah. So it's like, all right, then where do you go from there? So it's like, then you'd have to.
Yeah.
There's only sometimes.
So you
where,
got to build to that type of stuff and get there slowly. Don't try to climb. You don't just go to Everest and climb it, right? You got to build to it, and I think that's important, man. You believe it? It's been over an hour.
Wow.
It's been an hour and 12 minutes. We've been talking, which is awesome, man. I mean, it goes quick. So just why don't you tell everybody where they can find you? I'm also going to post it on the podcast with it on the YouTube channel and on.
So Monarch Training HQ on Instagram. MonarchTrainingHQ.com is my website. There's a bunch of articles there. MonarchTrainingHQ@gmail.com if anyone wants to reach out to me.
So it's Monarch Training HQ.
Yeah, because Monarch Training was taken and there was no.
You had to put something.
Yeah, but that doesn't have anything on it. So I'm like headquarters HQ. I'll just put that, whatever. So I just put that kind of on everything.
Works.
Because I think that the Instagram was taken and there was no.
That's why people ask me all the time why Xtreme Life is spelled the way it is.
Yeah, I'm sure
because somebody else had had what I wanted. So.
Yeah.
But I like it, so it worked out rather well.
Yeah, no, I think it's good.
But JoJo did the logos and stuff, which really worked out for me too. I like that a lot. So. All right, so monarchhq.com.
Monarch Training.
Monarch Training HQ. Sorry, I was going to screw everybody up and lead them to the wrong place. Don't go to the other one. Go to the one he said. Monarch Training HQ. And Tyler, thank you so much for coming on, man. I appreciate it. Anything else you want to say or plug or put out there?
Nah.
No, you're good.
That's it.
You're good, man. Well, I got to tell you, man, you brought a lot of information with you. I always enjoyed our conversations talking to you about, training and you definitely helped me a lot when I was struggling with some stuff in the lifting world. And, really, really cool, a lot of insight and knowledge. So I appreciate you coming on, sharing that stuff with me and everybody else who's going to check out the podcast. So thanks again, man. And,
thanks for having me.
I appreciate it. And we'll see you.